Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the top 10 decks for BRO V-Premium, which is this weekend. If you guys need any coaching for BCS, my Metafy link is in the bottom right hand corner, metafy.gg/Derek-Dow. Feel free to book a session with me and we can hopefully get you that top in the BCS season. So going through the power rankings for BRO2022 V-Premium, the first deck I definitely will recommend you guys test into is Gurguit. This deck is a powerhouse of a deck, absolutely crazy deck. With the revival of Percival, with the inclusion of Gurguit, just makes this deck super unfair. And you're probably like, Derek, why do I even need to care about your tier list? Because it's just going to be all Gurguit anyways. That is wrong. People who want to play their own decks will play their own decks, and not everybody will be playing Gurguit, and not everyone will be comfortable with running a high roll deck if they want to go through 8 rounds, 9 rounds of not drawing half of their Percivals. Half of those rounds, if they don't draw their Percivals, then they're going to look at other deck combinations. So Gurguit is definitely the first deck I 100% will see at V-Premium this weekend. And then the second one on that ranking is Night Rose. So Night Rose tracks back all the way back to BSFO 2021, back when Prism was at its peak. This deck hasn't changed at all. The deck coped really well into Prism back then, is still a force now, was a force like in the previous season for Springfest and so on and so forth. So this deck is just so good, hasn't changed, and just will run rampant this weekend. Third is Vanquisher. So Vanquisher has 2 builds, so one of them just being your pure Vanquisher build, and then the other build is with the book. I do think that Vanquisher is a very good deck in this particular metagame. Obviously, other than versing Gurguit, it has a really good multi-attack engine with like rock climbs, your jaggy shots into Chaturas and your rising phoenixes. There's just a lot of things going on for this deck. So I definitely do think that Vanquisher will be one of those decks to look out for. And then the next deck is Shaharan. Shaharan has actually been one of the sleeper decks come Springfest, especially at the start of the season, and then get to maybe like the last parts of the Springfest season. We saw a lot of Shaharan Amon, and this deck was piloted by one of my friends here in WA, Fu, who just played a pure, Shaharan variant with the Hope on Dams for the finishing turn, and the deck itself is just really good, functions really well, and just gets the job done. So yeah, that's the fourth deck. The fifth deck is Melody. Melody being one of the decks that did get hit slightly with the Meep to 1, but the replacement for it would be Sedna. This particular list ran Ellie, but I do think Sedna is much better, especially because then you'll be looking through your deck for grade 3, such as your Sonatars, your Karos, your Cannons, your Finas, and this deck is actually quite tanky, especially if you have multiple Finas and multiple Melodies in the front row to be able to intercept. So I do think that Melody will have a huge impact if anyone still has this deck and brings it along. And then the fifth is Himiko. Himiko is one of those decks that not a lot of people actually play, and those who play it are quite, how should I say, experienced with the deck. This deck can actually shoot you from 1 damage to 6 in one go, because it just stacks crit on an Yggdrasil with Force 2, pump a bunch of crits, and then pretty much restand with Norn on the rear guard. So this deck is actually really good, and it has huge power numbers, especially with this, because it can copy the power and crit of one of your other units as well. So Himiko is definitely a deck to look out for, and those who bring it I think will perform very well, especially if they're experienced in this metagame. And then the next deck to talk about is Astropolis. Astropolis hasn't changed at all. This deck is just as good as it is ever since it was released. Hits 70k with Valkyrian twice. Has Eosanis Dragon as a perfect guard. Has much more aggro than your Regalia builds, because the Regalia builds would be running the draw trigger PGs, whereas this deck would run the 30k Sentinels because it has a pseudo perfect guard in Eosanis. And Eosanis is actually searchable using your decay. So this deck has a lot going for it, has huge numbers using the Constellations grade 2, and yeah, this deck is just super duper strong. The 8th deck I definitely will see is Luard. As much as the Shaharan hit did hit this deck, I think this deck is still prominent in the metagame. This is Jonathan Haptism's list, who won first place in Jakarta, so I do think that this deck has a lot of potential. Even though that it doesn't have a countercharge engine, it still does what it does. You just need to be a little bit more careful with your resources when you're playing this deck. So definitely see this, and then I guess the other side of it, we'll see Raging Form. Just another deck for Shadow Paladin, a fan favorite, especially those people who played Raging Form back in the day. This deck is definitely a fan favorite for a lot of Shadow Paladin players out there, so we will definitely see some Raging Forms. And then the last deck will be Tharvas. As much as Pursuit Assaults is probably super hard to get, but those people who have Pursuit Assaults, and with the addition of the new promo Adelaide, I do think that this deck has a lot of potential going for it. And those who have access to this deck might actually find that the support cards in Adelaide and, you know, the Pursuit Assaults really bump this deck up a notch. And obviously there are other, you know, variants of decks out there, but I do think that these are the top 10 that I would rank amongst the decks that you will see at BRO2022 V-Premium this weekend. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. Comment down below what you think of the top 10 decks that you think you might see for the BRO this weekend. And yeah, if you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.